us up here. We are recording and we are live, which means we'll start to see.
Everything stated on this conversation is off the record.
It's an official off the record conversation here. Oh, Steve's on. I see him on here. All right, let me see if I can get a Facebook stream going too. Make that happen. Go live. Let's see. Meeting's being live streamed. Got it. Let's see what happens. Connection works. It says we're live. It says we're on. Last time I did this, and I had some audio errors. Okay, people are coming on now. Okay. I think we're good on that. I just got to make sure my audio. Can you still hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Different options here. Okay. All right. For everyone jumping on, thank you for joining us tonight. We will give it another minute or so before we get started. And we're also live on Facebook right now, streaming worldwide. All right. I think some more people come on here as well. And we're recording, so we're looking good there. Hope that all the technology works out well.
It always does.
In the end, it always does. Steve on here. I think Dave should be on here. Usually have stragglers coming in too afterwards.
If Steve's on, I'm going to be very nervous. Steve makes me nervous.
He'll be the one asking the questions and really digging deep on stuff. You know, with this version of Zoom, right? We eliminate the hecklers a lot, right? With for Steve, so it's like, you know, there's no heckling possible unless we approve of it. That's really
he must really struggle with that.
Yeah, exactly. He's cursing at the computer right now or something. Oh man! All right, cool. Well, it's 6:01. Let's get this show on the road. Dinner's waiting for us somewhere. Okay. Thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight. Happy Wednesday. Hope you're having a good week. My name is Josh Shine. I'm one of the partners at Trius Lending Partners. I have with me the esteemed man of the hour, Sam Polakoff, legend, mystery man, entrepreneur, businessman. No, in all seriousness, Sam is a really successful real estate investor, real estate developer, real estate guy, has done a lot of things, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is getting into him, his business, his company, a little bit of his experience. I told Sam earlier, and we were talking just leading up to our event here tonight, talking about, you know, what to talk about and what some of our clients who we work with want to hear. So we're a hard money lender. We do the short-term loans, the fix and flip loans, the investment property loans, commercial loans, et cetera. We do the long-term loans as well. And our client base is a client base that starts off with one loan, one flip, one hold, and is working to build that portfolio. So we have a lot of people in the new category, learning and getting going. We have a lot of them now that own 10, 15, 20, 30 holds, et cetera, and have done 10 or 15 or 20 flips. And that evolution for everyone is they want to be able to get to that next level. So they talk about multifamily, owning a lot more, getting into larger buildings, getting into commercial buildings, and then eventually getting into development. Right? I want to start buying stuff, building it. I want to rebuild a property or expand or do townhouses or condos or whatever. And that's what I think is most appealing and exciting for, based on, you know, what we're talking about tonight, and having Sam, thank you for being here, someone like you on here to hear how that evolution takes place. How do you progress and grow from where you were whenever you started, which we'll get into, to where you are today, which is, I know, a ton of different projects and a lot of balls in the air, which is what happens when you're getting to that level of development and that kind of size of the business. So let's just jump right in. Run through, if you would, a little bit of your beginning of your entry into real estate, into the local sort of market, and where and when you started and how it all took off.
So I'm going to go back a little bit earlier in that because I think it's sort of important to tell the story. So I graduated high school and went to college in the Wall Street era, right? And I was sure that I was the next Gordon Gekko. I was going to go to Wall
Love it.
Street and I was going to kill it, and I was Gordon Gekko. And I graduated college in 1991, and I started interviewing at Wall Street firms, New York, Baltimore, Alex Brown, all over the place. And ironically, what I learned was that every stockbroker in 1991 drove a 1987 Mercedes. I mean, it was true. And that's because 1987 was the big boom, and then there was a bust.
Right.
And no one bought a new car after 1987. I wound up taking a job in the markets, and 3 months in, got past my Series 7, did all that. 3 months in, couldn't stand it. I was miserable. And that's when I either wimped out and bailed out, or made the super smart decision to cut the losses.
Right.
I bounced around for about 9 months. I actually worked during the state legislative session for a lobbyist in Annapolis. That was the most fun I ever had. It was a great learning experience. And ultimately, I wound up in the spring of the summer of 1992, getting into real estate. And I started the same way you just explained most of your client base starting. The way most people start is I was investing in townhomes, row homes, small apartment buildings, and doing all that. And
all in the city, around Maryland. Where were you sort of identifying?
Yeah, it was Baltimore centric. So there was some county, but mostly the city.
Yep.
I mean, really the typical story.
Yeah. And the model was taking a place that needed like full gut rehab from scratch, or were these sort of some of the less significant sort of?
So I was mostly not doing fix and flips. I was mostly doing hold and rent.
Got it.
So we did the level of renovation that the unit required.
Right.
I will tell you that in the early 90s, we were not renovating properties as nicely as all the people watching and listening are renovating properties now. It was a different game.
For sure.
It was, I mean, I hate to say it, but how long ago? It was 30 years ago.
Yeah. Go figure.
So,
yeah.
And I was doing that, and that was great. While I was doing that, I actually went back to school, and I got my master's in real estate at Johns Hopkins. That was early in that Hopkins program. It's a great program. If anyone's interested, I recommend it.
Let me take 2 seconds on that. Worth the time, effort, energy, and cost to do it for education and connections and networking?
Yeah, I don't know. So the program is definitely better now than it was then. It was early in the days.
It was new, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that I got a ton out of the academic side, but the relationships and the networking were extremely valuable, both with the professors and with the classmates. I'm still close friends and have done deals with people I met in that program.
That's the key, the networking. Okay, that's really helpful because we don't, again, at our level of the kinds of loans and business we're doing and the kinds of clients we're working with most of the time, quite frankly, we don't run into a ton of people who have sort of advanced degrees in that. But I've run into a few who have asked about it here and there, and that is good to know that the networking connections are key for that. So you were doing that while you were still doing the other property.
Yeah, and that was a part-time, nighttime program, and I was young and single. So what was the difference? And a whole bunch of us used to go out and go happy hour afterwards. So it was great. It was great. And then while I was doing that, I actually hooked up with an old good friend from college who is from and was still living in the sort of Potomac, Bethesda area. And we started looking at doing larger commercial real estate deals together. We brought in a couple partners. His father joined us, and a couple other people joined us. And me and my friend Andrew were the leg guys. We were the grunt guys.
Yeah.
And we literally started the development company. And that was in about 1996.
Wow.
And we immediately started doing some deals. And the first local commercial real estate development deal we did was a big one. We partnered with Bill Streever and Wells Obrecht, and we developed the Natty Boh Tower with them.
Wow, that is awesome. How did that relationship happen?
So the first deal we did was we bought a piece of dirt in Loudoun County, and we were building a self-storage facility.
Nice.
And at the same time, Bill and Wells were getting started on Natty Boh, they had to do that. They owned the whole sort of complex, but they had to do the Natty Boh Tower, which was right on the front first, because it controlled the parking and it controlled some of the financing. And they were getting a ton of historic tax credits. And there were like 5 floors in the middle of the building that were the old cooling parts of the brewery. And because of the historic tax credits, they couldn't put windows in. There were no windows in that part of the building. So what do you do with a half of your building that you can't put windows in? You do self-storage. None of the national chains would touch it. Too much hair on it. Historic tax credits, new green credits. They just wanted to do their boilerplate, give me 3 acres and I'll build outdoor self-storage. So we bit, and the rest is history.
Wow, that's pretty cool. What, how long did it take for that project to sort of, how long were you guys working on that one?
So those projects are time consuming and cumbersome. We had the benefit of coming in later in the deal. And Bill and Wells had already done most of the legwork, and they had bought the buildings and the land, and they were doing the financing. But just the build out was a 2-year job.
Yeah. Wow. And let's talk money for a second on that. And I know we got a lot of ground to cover, but I want to just, while it's coming up, tax credits, financing. So backing up to you doing your own thing, I'm pretty sure with a lot of the people that you know, that we know, you were getting some short-term money, hard money, loans, et cetera, ability to buy some of these places, fund the rehabs, refi out with either bank or other type of long-term debt for the holds. When it came to these larger type projects, who is, so the developers, so who is getting the loan and from where, I guess is what I would ask.
Right. So yes, on the early stuff, it was almost all hard money on the acquisitions. It was a generation ago of hard money.
Yeah, for sure.
Most of the lenders I was using are not still in the business, if they're even still alive, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And then yes, we'd refi out. Those refis were hard back then. They're much easier now, believe it or not.
For sure.
When it came to the big deals, the Natty Boh Tower was a great one because we didn't have to finance it. It was already done by
They had that. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
But when we did, our first deal was a land development in Loudoun County, right? A greenfield land development, and Farmers and Mechanics, F&M Bank, did financing for us on the merits. And self-storage was booming, and we were at the right place at the right time. F&M doesn't exist anymore. It became part of M&T, bought it in probably the early 2000s. So then our loan wound up being with M&T Bank.
You guys went to them with no experience in doing that kind of a build for sure at that time.
So we were lucky in that we did have a couple partners who had a little bit of experience and a little bit of money. We can get into this as we go through it in as much detail as we want.
Yeah.
I'm happy to give everybody all the great reasons to do this and all the terrible reasons not to.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, really. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah. And okay, so got the financing for that, and then the other one, the Natty Boh had already been financed. Those guys had the financing lined up for that. Again, I'm just jumping on things while they're coming up. Tax credits comes up a lot in all these types of conversations with larger projects in the city, et cetera. How do those work on a Natty Boh type of project? What does it mean when you say tax credits? What does that do for everyone?
So I'm gonna come to current because it's a better example. And
sure.
Then we can back up.
Yep.
I'm just finishing a development project of the old Odell's nightclub on North Avenue.
Wow.
It is I don't know if anyone will call knows Odell's, but it's an infamous Baltimore East Coast nightclub, and it was empty for a decade.
Yeah.
And we're just finishing a renovation. This project did in fact get federal historic tax credits and state historic tax credits and new markets tax credits.
Wow.
They're complicated. You will, if you do a deal of any scale that has these tax credits, the good news is you're going to have consultants who do this professionally. That
was going to be my question. So, okay, so you hire a third party.
You're going to have an architect who speaks historic. Yep. You're in all likelihood going to have an historic tax credit consultant to handle the filings with the Maryland State historic folks and with the feds, with the National Park Service. And you're going to have attorneys who you are going to pay an obscene amount of money. You're going to make yourself sick when you go to closing.
And you're financing that sort of as your initial acquisition, part of the initial acquisition cost. Is that getting rolled into your financing, those kinds of soft costs? Is that part of potential financeable soft costs? Okay.
Yes, and you're going to deal with lenders who understand tax credits, and it does get complicated. So, for example, you don't actually get the tax credits in cash when you go to closing to develop it, right? You wind up selling the credits to investors, but the investors don't actually get the credits until the end of the project. They will pay you some of it up front, but you get most of it later. So you wind up having to have some bridge financing to bridge your tax credit equity. So these structures do get extremely complicated. I'll never forget the first time I did a tax credit deal. Mark Einstein, who was at the time the tax credit expert at Resnick, was a good friend of mine. And I called him and told him I wanted to do this. And he looked at me and said, Sam, I know you, and I'll only do this if you make me a promise. You'll trust me. You'll leave me alone to let me do this. And when you see what all the attorneys are making, you will not complain. You will just be grateful for the net benefit you're getting.
Wow.
And he was right. I mean, there was literally a $100,000 tax credit bill to an attorney in New York who I can't still figure out what they did.
And at the end of the day, it still is worth it to you, the investors, the project overall, when you have the ability to have tax credits, to have them.
Yeah, it's not always the case. If you have a building, if you want to renovate a crazy old church that has crazy steepled roofs and crazy steep, and it's all slate.
Yeah.
You may actually lose money by doing tax credits, because the tax credits will require you, if you don't have to for CHAP or other reasons, replace it with slate. That's an example where you may actually lose money on the tax credit. So it doesn't always work.
Okay, interesting. So backing up again. So Natty Bo worked on that one. Were you guys jumping into simultaneous projects while you were jumping into that one, or was that like a focus for a few years?
Yeah, so we really wound up finishing the new construction development in Loudoun County and doing Natty Bo at the same time.
Wow. While
we were doing those, we were looking for other deals. We got into some other deals. Some of it is sort of convoluted. We famously were once involved in a site in Baltimore City that you may now know as the Baltimore City Casino. We actually had development rights for that site at one time. Wow. We had development rights before casinos were legal in Baltimore or even Maryland, so we had no idea. Then they became legal. We got into a complicated thing. Actually, that was a project that I was working on with Ray Lewis.
No way! Ah, look at that. That's awesome.
Development team.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool. Oh my God.
We had a great project, but that one wound up not happening. We also got ourselves involved in a big project in Northeast Ohio, which is a whole separate story.
So you guys are looking around for opportunistic potential where you could put your skill, your knowledge to work.
Correct. And I will tell you, because we can go back and go forward and do whatever you want. But I will tell you that then the recession kicked in.
Right.
There were some crazy, challenging times. And what wound up happening out of the recession is we still have this project in Ohio that I'm working with this group, but I am currently, and for the past 10 years or so, primarily developing in Baltimore on my own account, no longer with those partners. I still have some stuff with those partners, but I'm currently working mostly on my own with equity investor partners and lending partners like you.
Yep. So as the recession hit, the world changed. You said, listen, I'm going to go off my own, do my own thing, raise my own funds from people when needed, borrow my own funds when needed, et cetera. So I want to keep moving forward and stay a little more current, but I have a few questions along the way. When you say development rights, which can apply for back then and potentially now, what does that mean? How does something like that happen?
If Baltimore City puts out an RFP, BDC put out an RFP for this swath of land down on the water, just south of Raven Stadium and just north of the incinerator. And we wound up, this new unknown local development company wound up competing with with Stahlback and Mannequin, and Pat Turner and Himmelrich and all these people. And we actually won those development rights in a crazy competition with BDC. And we won the development rights. You sign a negotiating agreement, an ENP, an exclusive negotiating right. And from there, you go on to negotiate the actual agreement or contract of sale. It was during the negotiation of the actual contract that the casino stuff at the 11th hour came up.
Wow.
And it was very complicated because we had spent a lot of money on design and things like that.
Yeah. Wow. So do you still do some of that yourself right now, as far as getting some of those rights and being involved in some of those bids as well?
So we have done Baltimore City. We have responded to multiple RFPs. We've developed a couple. I haven't done one in a while.
Yeah.
There haven't been a lot of great ones, I think. I mean, it depends what you're looking for, right? I mean, there was just one that was interesting on the west side, right next to the Mayfair Theater that just got announced this week.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So when you're looking at deals then and then transitioning to now, were all these deals and opportunities you were looking for was to develop with the intent of, I want to sell, make my money, move on, or I want to develop, I want to hold, I want to be a long-term sort of hold guy on different types of projects, different types of buildings and investments around?
I've always been more of a hold guy.
Yeah.
Everything's for sale. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Everything's economics, but I believe that there's real value in owning real estate. I believe that is a great way to create wealth. I believe in owning real estate. It's great for your tax return.
Yeah, sure.
It's complicated and it's hard and there's downside, but I'm a hold guy.
Yeah. Okay, good. So fast forwarding to sort of recent years, right? So you sold the Ohio one, but then said, hey, I want to really start doing my own stuff. What was the pivot for you in where you decided to sort of approach business? I know you've picked certain areas that you sort of like a lot. Did that start with scattering around the city and just doing everything, or were you zoned in pretty immediately on where you wanted to be, or what?
Yeah, it was a combination of things. So I will tell you that I did three projects all sort of around that recessionary kind of time that were construction management deals where I didn't own them, but I did them for nonprofits. I don't do construction management for, for-profits. But I did a crazy project for the Baltimore School for the Arts, which will always be the hardest and best project I've ever done.
Wow.
I did a project for the Babe Ruth Birthplace Museum, and I did a project for the Baltimore City Montessori Public Charter School.
Wow.
So I was doing all of those. And what I'm doing right now is mostly Northeast Baltimore, which is where I have a loan with the greatest lenders in Baltimore.
Trius lending. Yes. Yep.
And that actually happened by accident. I knew the Northeast Baltimore, Lauraville, Hamilton neighborhood from having just gone to the restaurants there, Hamilton Tavern, Chameleon, Coco's. And a friend of mine asked me in about 2005 in about 2015, to look at a property his family owned that the tenant just moved out and they didn't know what to do with it. And while I was driving up Hartford Road, I passed an empty lot at the corner of Hartford and Southern, and it had a McKenzie sign on it. And the broker at McKenzie was a good friend of mine. And I called him up from the car and I said, hey, you've got this old beat up sign on this property, which leads me to believe it's been here for a long time.
Yeah, right.
What's going on? And he told me, don't waste my time. You can't buy this. I said, okay, I'll bite. Why can't I buy it?
Right.
He said, because it's a real problem. So there was a pretty obtrusive urban renewal plan in the neighborhood. And one of the things it did amongst many is it prohibited drive-throughs. And they had a corner site in the city and they were doing what they thought they were supposed to do. And they were marketing it to fast food and convenience and all that. But everybody demanded a drive-through. They found out the urban renewal plan prohibited it and they walked away. It's not what we wanted to do. So long story short, we wound up buying it. On that site, we wound up developing, the site's only a half an acre.
Yeah.
It was the first project we were doing in that marketplace. So I brought in my architect and my civil engineer. I said, okay, let's study the zoning. Let's do a due diligence study. and let's design a project that we can do by right. I do not want to get any variances or any zoning changes.
Right.
And we wound up building a 16-unit apartment building, 16 2-bedrooms on top of 9,000 square feet of retail.
Wow.
And I'll really give you a mouthful to make things even more complicated. We decided that we were going to build Baltimore's first commercial modular development. And as far as we can tell, we have now built Baltimore's only commercial modular.
Well, right. So what does that mean?
So the first floor was traditionally built on site, steel, concrete. The upper 2 floors that house the apartments were off-site construction. So they were built in a warehouse in Pennsylvania, Lancaster, actually up in Wilkes-Barre.
Wow.
And they were shipped down to the site on tractor trailers. There are like 40 modular boxes that then over a period of 6 days got set by crane.
Crazy. Walls, everything, just pop them right in.
They were literally boxes, so modules. They had finished kitchens inside the boxes when they left Pennsylvania. They had finished bathrooms. The tubs were in. The kitchen cabinets were in.
Turnkey, do nothing. They put them in.
No, it wasn't turnkey, do nothing. There was a lot to do after they got set. And I will tell you, for anyone who thinks modular is great, I think it is great. It's a huge learning curve.
Yeah.
Don't do modular without calling me first.
Right.
You need to have a team that understands it. There's a very steep learning curve.
So you would do modular again.
I will do it much better and much smarter. You know, look, I thought to myself, okay, I'm a great developer. I'm really sophisticated. I can do this. I got a great Charles Alexander's, who's one of my best friends and my architect, is the best architect in town.
I remember Eric telling me about this. Yep.
Right, you know Charles Alexander. Mike Constantine Commercial Construction, a sophisticated builder. I'm like, we're good. We got this. All 3 of us are like, this is crazy.
Wow.
Because they're not builders. They're manufacturers. They make a widget. And they don't think the way we do, and they don't use the same language that we do, and they don't permit the way we do. There's a learning curve.
Time frame a lot quicker, all in, end to end.
So at the end of the day, it really isn't cheaper. It's really about the same by the time you factor in crane costs and all this other stuff. But if you do it right and you finish your site work, and within a short period of time of doing that, your modules come in, you literally in a week go from having a finished site with steel set to having a basically fully enclosed building.
Wow, that's crazy.
So time is money, right? You're reducing the time you're carrying the interest and making payments, and you're leasing faster. So if you do it right, there is a significant schedule savings.
But having said that, like to your point,
I didn't get that schedule savings.
Right, I know it didn't work out that way. But and to your point, no one else is really doing that around here.
Yeah, they're doing it more in places where labor's more expensive, right? So they do it a lot in New York.
Yeah, okay.
They do it a lot in Boston, places where you have almost exclusively union labor.
Yeah, sure. Wow, that's interesting.
Because then you go to the offsite in Pennsylvania or someplace like that, and you're paying a much lower labor rate.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. So when you're looking at opportunities in recent years, that kind of an opportunity comes up in that area. What's the process of finding these deals? I mean, what are you stumbling on them, or how do you actively search for them? How do they find you?
So we had our hands full trying to figure out what to do with this site. We struck up a really good relationship with the community associations, the residential and the Main Street, because it's actually the Hartford Road, the Hamilton Larval Main Street is a designated Main Street. While we were planning it, not even building it, while we were planning it, a building a half a block away was going vacant. And it had been a problem property for the neighborhood. And the head of the Main Street organization came to me and said, Sam, this property is becoming available. Would you please buy it? And I said, no. I said, I'm crazy busy. We got to figure out what we're doing over here. No way. We wound up buying it.
Yeah.
And it is now the home of Zeke's Cafe. So we moved Zeke's into it. It wound up being a great situation for us. I can talk more about this, but while we're doing both of those, a lender I have a relationship with from Midstate calls me and says, I hear about all this stuff you're doing right there. We just took back a loan. It's a real problem, a half a block away from you. The feds are all over us. We don't really want to spend the time to market it and not know where we're going to bind up. Would you please buy it? So again, I said, no, I'm way too busy.
Right.
And we wound up buying it. It is now home to the largest Black woman-owned co-working space in the country.
Wow, that's awesome. Oh my God.
So this literally all happened in the period of about a year. So we bought all three of these and then started building them out over the period of about a year.
What year was this?
So we started this process in 2005. I believe that it took a little time to get everything going. I believe, so we didn't get our use and occupancy permit on the new construction one, which was the first one, until 2020.
You mean 15? You started in 15?
Correct.
2015.
I meant 15.
2015, and you got the UNO in 2020.
The big one until 2020.
Yeah.
We got use and occupancy on the Zeke's property in, I believe, 17.
Yeah.
And on what's now the co-working in probably 18.
Wow. Co-working's going well. Zeke's going well.
So they're all going really well. Co-working had a little bit of a tough time during the
COVID.
pandemic, you can imagine.
Right.
But it's rebounded and doing very well. Zeke's is fantastic.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to talk to me on anything, you got about a 50-50 shot that anytime you walk into Zeke's, I'll be there because I'm there about 3 or 4 times a day.
That's like your office. Yeah, right.
Correct. And my office is immediately across the street in another building that we actually bought as a defensive acquisition because we've done so much on this block. And it was the last real problem property in the neighborhood. It was a storefront church that was owned by a pastor who lived on McDonough Road in Owings Mills. And he had apartments upstairs that were paying rent by the week, if not the hour.
Yeah,
Really, really bad.
Yeah.
Literally, I had a police officer come up to a beat cop who knew who I was, come up to me in the street and say, "You really got to buy that building because it's a real
wow."
And
at this point, you were so into the neighborhood, so into the community, like we got to just go all in and try to control everything, right? Yeah.
I mean, literally, the officer told me this is where all the neighborhood drug trade and prostitution.
Wow. And so bought that, renovated that. That's currently rentals on top.
Our office is in there. It's currently rented. Here's a great opportunity for me to tell everyone something really important. People and relationships are really important. Trust is really important. I've only done 2 hard money loans recently. I did one on that building because it was a really hard building to finance with a bank because it was gross. It was really foul. The tenants were upstairs. Literally, my coworker and I walked in there to tour it and walked out with fleas. I'm not even kidding.
Wow.
It was bad. And the one that I have a loan with you guys on.
Yeah.
And I would do business with you any day of the week and twice on Sunday. I will just tell you that the other loan I did is a group that I would never do business with again.
Because rates, fees,
because
just overall,
because they're not honest and good operators.
Yeah. No, that's all they do.
Unfortunately, we all get painted by the worst in our industry, right?
Always.
You get that as a lender, I get that as a developer.
For sure. And to your point on the relationships, knowing the neighborhood players, the beat cop, the people, the community, ingratiating yourself in that community has been really the key to the success in your revitalization and your ultimate success as a developer there.
I participate in community association meetings all the time and present to them. I'm on a cell phone and email basis with the heads of all the surrounding neighbor associations.
Yeah.
And they all tell me they like me, so I assume it's true. But we do talk to them and we listen to them and we work with them. And I think it's been a really good relationship.
Yeah. So one of the questions I always think about with all these projects going on and you're buying this place and that place, and you really didn't plan on buying that and didn't plan on buying this, didn't plan on buying that. How does a developer pay their car payment while they're borrowing all this money and working on all these projects? nothing's cash flowing yet. And I run into people, and Steve and I have certainly run into people on a smaller level, certainly you, Sam, who are like, I'm going to develop this. I'm like, how are you going to afford to live during this time? What's your plan? And so on a larger scale, how does that work for someone in your position? And I'm not getting into your pocketbook, but just in a broad sense, how do developers balance living, getting paid, and balancing the money?
This is really important. So I talk to people all the time who want to, even people who are experienced in real estate and development, who want to leave a company where they're getting a salary and start on their own account. And I tell them all the time, I say, look, it's great. And I love doing it. I love being my own boss. The hard part is how you get started, right? You can't do that unless you have an alternate means to pay your bills. And it's not for 3 months. It's likely for, at least a year. And it's only a year if you really do have a loan that will pay you a development fee while you're doing your construction, keeping in mind that as soon as you have cost overruns or budget blow-ups, the first thing that goes is the developer fee. But you've got to have another way to pay yourself while you're doing the first project or two. There's no question about it.
And some of them can go way past a year. I mean, we've talked to people and heard the stories of 3, 5, 7-year project. Now, when it pays off in the end, they're going to kill it. They're going to be printing money, but you got to be able to ride that out and survive and live during that time.
There's also a huge difference between, look, I mean, not every development or redevelopment project is alike, right? Just like not every buy and flip is alike, right?
Yeah.
So, my new construction project had every challenge you could possibly have. I mean, you're talking about site work and utility connections, and things that don't exist. And I made it more complicated by doing modular. But, some of my the 2 renovation projects that came after it, even though they were full gut renovations with full Baltimore City permitting and all that, they were bought later and finished sooner because they're just easier, because you don't have as many challenges often. So you have to remember too, that not every project is created equal. Some are harder than others.
Yeah, for sure. So leading in, and let me just take a quick interruption for everyone, or quick announcement rather. Feel free to throw questions in the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. We're trying to stay between 6 and 7 o'clock. It's 6:36 right now. Try to do a stop at 7, but we're happy to stay and answer questions. If there are questions, feel free to ask away. The Q&A button is, like I said, at the bottom of your screen. So pivoting over to like the here and now, the current world we're in, knowing what you know now, extensive experience, large projects, medium projects, not really any small stuff anymore. You're doing a lot of stuff. Thinking back to where you were when you guys first did that one, and you were just still doing the smaller type flips and holds and that kind of thing, or rather not flips, just holds. If you were in a position, as a lot of our investors are, where they've done a bunch of properties, hold a bunch of properties, but are looking to maybe scale to that next level, what would you do right now if you were sort of starting out right in this moment in time, knowing everything you know now?
I think there's value in knowing what you know and building on what you know as a platform. If what you know is residential and you own residential rental properties, then I would start with larger residential, right? Whether it's larger multifamily buildings, or even if you want to get into commercial, do mixed use, ground level commercial with residential above, because the residential will help with the cash flow. But there is value in knowing what you know and growing from that base. Understand that if you have a portfolio now, you will need the revenue from that portfolio to sustain you. And, development projects and redevelopment projects take money usually before you can finance them. Right. You can't really find it. It's much more difficult to do a back of the napkin budget for a 20-unit building with retail at the ground level than it is for a fix and flip house. So in order to do a real budget, to know how much you need to borrow, you need to do some architectural drawings. You need to have a GC do some budgeting. You may need some some civil engineer or some MEP engineer work. And to my chagrin, most of those professionals like to get paid for the work.
Yeah, go figure.
So you have to be prepared to spend the money before you're financeable.
Yeah. So at what point would you say architectural drawings are needed? At what size, in either dollars, square footage, or units, would you say you need to start getting the architects and the engineers involved?
I think it's more of a permitting thing, quite frankly.
Okay. Yeah.
You can do your own permit for a single house fix and flip oftentimes.
Yeah.
Even if you shouldn't, sometimes you can.
Right.
Sometimes, look, we've all been there, right? You can get away with a lot of projects without doing a permit.
Right. We see that too sometimes. Yeah.
No, of course. I mean, look, you can get away with a lot of projects.
Right.
If you're doing a larger project where, look, if you're doing a larger project, you're going to get busted if you don't have a permit, right? Because the inspectors will see you, you will get busted.
Yeah.
And once you start pulling a permit for a mixed use or just a larger commercial building, those permits are going to have real MEP review, electrical review. You're going to have someone size your electric services.
Yeah.
You're going to need an architect and probably an MEP engineer to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that's a good answer. Makes sense. In looking at deals and opportunities, if you're new and where you are now, is it more exciting to see an empty parcel of land and say, I can do whatever I want here, or an existing structure and work around that, within that, and redoing that?
An existing structure is much easier to do. It's also much faster.
Is it more profitable, less profitable, same
less
cash
risky,
on cash?
less risky.
Right.
There's less opportunity for the budget to blow up, for the project to be delayed. There's less. Look, if you're doing a new construction project, timing's everything, right? If you think you're going to start construction in April and you get delayed 5 months, you want to start your site work, you can get stuck with winter and freezing ground. What's going to happen? When the new construction project I talked about at the corner of Hartford and Southern, we actually had the city approve a stormwater connection plan for us. Then the state said, no, you can't actually do that because there's inadequate capacity. And we had to make our stormwater connection like 100 yards down Southern Avenue, which wound up costing us a bloody fortune in digging up the street, making those connections, putting it back. That wasn't in our budget. We were already financed.
Right. So what you're out of pocket for that? Going back to the bank? What are your options?
You're going back to the bank. You're going back to your equity partners.
Everyone, right?
Any.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's a lot of pain and suffering that can come up. Yeah.
Yeah, and that doesn't happen typically.
Right,
on
an
existing building, because you're using an existing connection.
Yeah.
So existing buildings are absolutely easier. They can be big. They can be great. They have their own challenges, but they are usually faster and easier from a development and construction standpoint.
Yep, got it. And in looking for opportunities, if you're, again, relatively new, starting out, open-minded to where you want to be, haven't really identified your niche or your area, but you feel like you've grown and evolved enough to start to look at this, where would you start peeking around, or how would you start to get a feel for what you want to be doing to be a developer, to grow into this?
Yeah, look, one of the hardest parts we all do in everything we do is acquisition, right? In finding what it is we're going to buy, finding property, right? Everyone on this call is looking for assets to buy. And what you're finding is everything's overpriced, and
for sure,
every seller wants more than every buyer wants to pay. And it's the same thing. You just have to scour the market. You have to figure out what you're looking for, where you're looking. Some of it is by plan and some of it's by luck, right? I wound up doing 4 projects so far, with 2 more development projects in the pipeline right now in Northeast Baltimore by chance.
Yeah.
And everyone always says, where's the next Hamden? Where's the next Fells Point?
Right.
And, there's no next Hamden, there's no next Fells Point, but everyone's always looking for the next big thing. Right. And you got to take a gamble sometimes and pick a relatively stable area where you think there's growth opportunity. I found that Northeast Baltimore was stable had a very stable residential backbone with a commercial corridor that I thought was underdeveloped and undervalued, and there was opportunity there.
Yep. Money side, equity partners, obviously hard money lenders, putting that aside, banks, financing, and equity partners. How does that mix work? Identifying and finding the equity partners, how, who, what do they make? What do you make? How does the bank kick in? How does that whole structure work to put deals together?
So the bank is important. The bank is, look, you don't want to be over leveraged. We've all learned that. Having said that, the bank is your cheapest money. Right.
Always.
The traditional lending bank is your cheapest money. But they're only going to give you a certain percentage of the deal. What percentage that is complicated, right? Because they're going to give you the lower of a certain percentage of cost, a certain percentage of as completed appraised value. There's going to be all these metrics, and they'll give you the lower of those metrics.
Right.
So you don't know what those are. I would assume going in that a traditional bank is probably going to be somewhere in the 60 to 70% range of your cost. That leaves you with 30 to 40%, which can be a lot of money.
Yep.
Your equity investors are more expensive than the bank, right? If you're paying the bank, even in today's dollars, 5%, call it, on a development deal, you're paying your equity. Your equity is going to want to net probably in the mid to high teens.
Yep.
Now, that's going to come from a combination of, interest or preferred returns, as we call them, and an ownership interest.
Yep.
So, equity is expensive. Equity costs you ownership interest typically and a preferred return. So what happens is the bank gets paid for your costs, get paid, including the bank. Then your investors get typically a preferred return. Then if there's anything left, you're going to share what's left with the investors.
Right, with whatever that split is. So they're looking for a teens return on an annual overall basis, and that's a combination of interest payments you're making on the preferred rate and then additional profit distribution, et cetera, overall.
And there's no science to what that deal looks like.
That was going to be my next question. Is there like a set structure?
Everyone does it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
You probably need an attorney who's somewhat well-versed in this stuff to help you put the deal together. There needs to be an operating agreement. If you're going to follow the letter of the law, you got to file some SEC stuff. There's some stuff involved.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're negotiating this deal with your investors. And what winds up happening is, the first deal we did, we negotiated with several of our investors. We wound up with a deal that everybody agreed to, and that wound up becoming my boilerplate. And I've used that same boilerplate now a dozen times or whatever it is. And now it's easy because I have the deal. I don't have to rewrite it. I have it.
Right.
But you got to get it. And, I was very lucky in that I did have friends and family who were able to participate in my deals, who were willing to participate in my deals. I take my investors are about the most important thing in the world, because without them, there is no money and no deals. So treat them well if you can. Be honest. And if you don't have friends and family, it does get complicated, right? There are plenty of people out there. There are platforms now by which you can sometimes get equity invested. If the deal is big enough, there are other ways to do it. If anybody wants to do this and they're struggling with this, I am willing to talk to you. We have JV'd with people before. So if anybody wants to get my phone number from Josh, let him know, and he'll give you my phone number.
Absolutely, happy to share. So with just going back to one of the comments you made about the investors, sharing news, keeping them in the loop, both good and bad, right? Here's what's not working, guys. I want you to know we're behind schedule or whatever it might be, right? Just keeping them informed of everything, right?
And it's like everything else, right? It's hard, right? It's hard. It's hard to know what to say, when to say it. It's hard to know what the right thing is.
Right.
We've all been there, right? We've all been there, and good news is easy to share. Bad news is harder to share.
For sure.
The reality is no news is sometimes the hardest to share. But it's a process.
Are generally speaking, have your equity partners been a more passive group to what you're doing, or has that evolved over time into more?
Yes, my equity investors are mostly more passive. And look, I will admit that one of my weaknesses in some cases has been some of that communication, right? I'm a very small operation. And I focus all of my energy on development deals and management. And the piece of it that is writing emails and updates and all that, it's the easiest part to push back and push aside. So I'd be lying if I said that that was my strength.
Got it. No, that's fair. And then to continue on the financing side, so equity partners, bank, helping to structure the whole deal, put it all together. Projects done, are those bank loans converting into long-term loans, or are you doing a separate transaction or a new transaction with someone else to be in the long-term hold loan?
So most of our construction loans convert to perm.
Got it.
We are now in the process of refinancing a bunch of stuff. Tomorrow is hopefully a good day for me and Josh both. We're supposed to be closing on a refinance on his loan tomorrow. I will tell you all that we're doing that refinance with Fulton Bank, and we haven't closed yet, but so far they've been a pleasure to deal with.
Good to hear. But it takes, how long does that take in beginning to end? If you close tomorrow, because it ain't quick.
This one took longer than most because we actually had an appraisal problem.
A lot of that happens too, but we got an
appraisal that was much lower than it should have been. I still think the appraisal is just outright wrong in a lot of ways, but we're making it work.
That's weird. I never hear that from real estate investors, Sam. So odd.
Never. But I'm right.
Of course. You absolutely.
So a refinance is easier than an acquisition construction loan.
Right.
It's definitely an easier process. A refinance should probably take about 3 months.
Okay, that's what I was going to say.
That sounds. They drag out. But it takes you about a month to get it started and underwritten. It takes about a month to get an appraisal, and closing always takes longer than you want.
Right. So 3 months on a refi, and on a purchase, what do you guesstimate to get it closed?
I've had purchases which literally closed in the same 3 months, and I've had purchases that literally took like 9 months to close. And we've jumped in, not with you, with some people on some bridge lending. So we've had people call us up and say, I've been approved with XYZ Bank for 60 days. They say it's at least another 60. My seller is like, you don't close next week, we're out, and we're keeping your EMD. I've extended 6 times, whatever the story might be. And they're coming to us for, I need that 60 or 90-day loan. The bank is lined up. I have everything. We've heard from the bank saying, oh, we're good. We'll close in 60 days. We just can't move any quicker. And so we provided that bridge financing for them as well on that. And by the way, when the bank says they're going to close in that 60 days, they probably won't. I mean,
right, for sure. It's going to be 90 or 120, right? No, just, you got to have that patience and have that time. So it's a quick question on that. So when you're doing a contract on something that ends up taking 9 months, those are just continued extensions. The seller realizes that it's no one's fault and they're okay just sitting there. What if the market's changed, pricing has changed? How is some of that dealt with?
So you need to be educated on all of that stuff going into a deal. And we've had deals that got dragged out and got really messed up in that regard. But we've also had deals where we were just smart and we went in and said, look, I typically am buying stuff that I'm not competing on, right? I'm finding stuff that's undervalued, undermarketed, and I'm either the only one or one of a few people looking at it. I didn't have a lot of competition on any of these deals I bought. Because who the heck wants to buy this piece of crap land with bad zoning, or who
you were identifying
which was an abandoned beauty academy, whatever it was. So we're negotiating deals where we're just being honest. We're saying, look, here's how long it's going to take. Here's how long we need. In many cases, we have had to go do an extension. During the pandemic, we did walk away from a deal because we wanted a very long extension and the seller wouldn't give it to us. But you need to have realistic expectations going in on how long the process is going to take. I mean, we've actually submitted term sheets to sellers where we've asked for a 6-month study period.
Gives you that time, gives you that
I mean,
padding to figure things out.
if you're buying a gas station, for example, right? You know that you need phase 1 environmentals, and then you need a phase 2 environmental, you need to remove tanks, and this stuff takes time. And you can't buy it until all that's done, because you got to put it into the state program, so you're not on the hook for those environmental contaminants.
Right.
That stuff takes time.
For sure. Long term. Let me hit some questions, and then it's 6:53. If you have any questions, everyone, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section. We'll do a few questions, then I have a few final items to wrap up and just sort of wind down with Sam Polakoff here. Okay. How do you manage the flow of materials and permits on the projects you do? Good question. Yeah.
Well, that is actually a very pertinent question right now.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare. I actually walked through a job today with one of our GCs. And he brought some subs because we're pricing a restaurant build out.
Yep.
And the mechanical guy asked what the schedule was, and we told him. He said, I just want you to know that Train, who's one of the mechanical manufacturers, is 6 months right now. And one of the other manufacturers is 4 months.
Yep.
So it's a real issue. Where I told you we're finishing this Odell's project.
Yeah.
We would have been done 3 months ago, but we're still waiting on light fixtures. We got delayed on an elevator. Supply chain and lumber costs are real. So at the beginning of a project now, have a very specific and detailed conversation with your GC.
On those expectations.
Realistic expectations, both on cost and schedule, because they're in flux. One of the things we're doing now is when we start a project, we're buying as much as we can now and storing it. Because, prices may go down, but we're willing to take the risk to lock in that price because there's a real chance they'll go up. But it's a very real thing. Work closely with your GC and with your architect to lock that stuff down.
We're seeing on even the smaller projects, buying their appliances the day of closing, getting the windows ordered the day of closing. I mean, all that stuff. So, and on the organizational side of that, is that just a spreadsheet you have? Is it a software you use, or?
It's a spreadsheet. We typically use whatever it is our team uses, right? So whatever the GC uses, we'll just use theirs. Whatever format they want.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Another good question here. Jade, a real estate agent. Do I need to be licensed as a builder/developer to develop land and install modular homes? What are the basic steps? Good question. Yeah.
So you don't need to get licensed to do that. Your team will be licensed, right? You will have to have your plans will get stamped. You have to have a licensed GC to build it. Your subs will be licensed. You yourself don't have to be licensed to be the developer. The crazy thing is, all we, the developer, we're the conductor, right? All we do is tell people what to do, and they do it. I obviously overstate that, but we're not doing what the state declares to be sort of a skilled thing that requires a certain licensing.
That's actually great feedback, and that really summarizes nicely what a developer does. The conductor, the hub, whatever you want to call it. You don't have a crew of 10, 20, 50, or 100 guys and 3 different locations of storage and 50 trucks. Yeah, it's 2 of you.
2 guys.
Beautiful.
It's me and another dude.
Heck yeah. Love that. That's great. That's it. Now, having said that, you've got how many projects, how many people working on how many different sites, and this and that, but it's just all that is outsourced to licensed people that are doing all that work.
Yeah, I know there's more questions coming, but I have to say this just because Steve will be remiss if I didn't. We have 2 projects in the pipeline right now in Northeast Baltimore that will hopefully start construction in about 6 to 9 months. One is an 80 unit apartment building, and one is 22 tiny homes.
Ha! Love it. Oh my God.
Just saying. Love
that. 22 tiny homes. Have you done that before?
No, this will be Baltimore's first tiny home development.
You got to get some good press on that. You got to get some PR going on that. That's awesome. All right, another question. Love this presentation. Does Sam have some type of plan for his investors/projects in case he would get hit by a bus? Good question. My kids keep asking me this. I don't have a plan for my project in case of my demise. It's funny. I've had those questions too. When you're the key person, Steve and I, in this case, are key, Dave, all the partners, right? What happens if everyone's on a plane together, God forbid? What do you tell people? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, we all have that problem, right? We all have that problem. What happens if I'm not here? And unfortunately, it becomes a problem for the ones we love, not necessarily us. Well, we do have redundancy in the office. The guy who works with me is sort of redundant, right? We do the same things on purpose, so we have that. We have the same attorney on all of our deals. He has all the paperwork. He knows where the bodies are buried. And it's tough. And ultimately my family will take over my ownership interest. My gut is that if that happens, the assets get sold, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like, should Steve, Dave, and I be on a plane together? I don't know.
No, right. You have that conversation. You have that conversation with your wife, but you don't have it with your partner. It's interesting.
My wife's like, you shouldn't do that. Anyway, so all right. One more, and then I have a few final questions. How do you look at interest rate and loan point costs when going hard money? I mean, I'll answer that, and then you can answer that, Sam. I mean, our clients, when looking at rates, points, costs, this is just baked into the overall recipe, the overall ROI, your overall projections on your deal is looking at costs. There are costs for borrowing money, and there's costs to be able to do it quickly. On the hard money side, as someone who can get a loan closed in 3 days, okay, there's a cost associated with that. And so if we're charging someone a few points, 3 points and 12%, we do better than that. We have higher rates than that. We have different ranges, but that's a cost associated with being able to move quickly. You factor that into your overall ROI, but it will allow you to secure this property you wouldn't otherwise get. What are your thoughts on that, Sam?
No question. I mean, look, my interest rate with Fulton Bank tomorrow starts with a 3.
Yeah, beautiful. Sure,
right?
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous. I'm paying them a point to get there. It's great.
Locked in for how long?
5 years.
5 years. Yep.
But in today's market, that's a really low rate.
For sure.
But I have a loan with Josh where I'm paying a higher interest rate because that was the right deal for me for that property. And I will do another deal with Josh because there will be another deal where either Fulton Bank's not going to do it, or I don't have time for Fulton Bank to do it, or whatever the case may be. So you have to understand what you're financing and what your options are and what the market is.
Yeah, for sure. And we're in a rising interest rate market as well. So a rate like that on a bank loan tomorrow is phenomenal.
By the way, real quick, I'm paying Fulton Bank a number that starts with a 3. I have a term sheet from Fulton Bank for another loan we're trying to refinance that should close in about 60 days.
4 or 5?
No, but it starts with a 4.
4. I was going to say that'd be
everything.
I mean, everything.
My rates are going up.
Yeah, for everything. 2 final comments, questions, whatever. Number 1, you mentioned what you're working on. Give us a quick overall. So what are you working on now and in the pipeline? You mentioned those 2. Those are 2 big projects.
Yeah, so we have this big one, which is an 80-unit apartment project on the corner of Hartford and White Avenue. So it's the northern edge of Hamilton.
That's awesome.
It's 0.8 of an acre, and we're doing 80 units, 4 stories high. Super, super cool. We're working on drawings now. Charles Alexander, of course, is doing the design. And we're hoping to break ground in about 6 months.
Wow.
At the same time, we're working on permit drawings for 22 tiny homes around the corner, right across the street from our loan with you.
Wow.
Which is, it's a rental project, but it's going to be really, really cool.
Wow.
And when it's done, we're happy to do a tour for you and your clients.
I was going to say, I want to do this in 6 or 9 months, do the same thing and update on this stuff. What made you go tiny home? Where'd you come up with that? It's wild.
So real quick, I'll tell you that our sort of business model is that we're always trying to create a better mousetrap. We're trying to do things better. We wanted to do modular because we thought that there was a real future in offsite construction. It's cleaner, it's greener, there's less waste, it's actually better quality construction, blah, blah, blah. Tiny home, we think there's a real market for tiny homes. We do a terrible job of creating affordable housing. We throw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of subsidy per unit to build crazy townhouses and apartments for affordable housing. We think that we can build market rate tiny homes that will compete with affordable housing on rent. Awesome. And we think that we'll be able to build an actual tiny home business out of this project and do some nonprofit stuff in the city and create some tiny homes for transitional housing and recovery housing without having to get hundreds of thousands of dollars per unit in subsidy.
Love that. I think it's a great idea. We talk all the time with our clients within the marketplace, how expensive housing is. Prices have gone through the roof. How do you afford it to buy a starter home? How do you afford to buy any home? How much money do you need to make to buy a home? That's why rentals are so attractive right now.
Did you see the article in the BBJ yesterday that a church in Canton's being torn down and a handful of new townhomes are being built, and they're going to be nice townhomes, but the prices will start in the sevens.
I mean, that's it. So how does anyone live? Where do you, I mean, $700,000. So
over $700,000 for a townhouse in Canton.
Yeah. I mean, that really is the crux of the problem, and to be able to have a potential solution you're talking about, I think is an awesome, exciting idea. Hold on, let me see. We have two questions. They're sneaking under the wire here. How do you decide the number of bedrooms that are best for the apartment buildings? And
that's a great question.
Yeah.
Was there a second part?
The follow-up is related to the tiny homes, which might be an easy question. Do the tiny homes have basements?
No, so the tiny homes are really simple.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the tiny homes are basically a studio apartment
with
its own front door, its own deck, its own backyard. They're really cool.
Yeah. But on the other question, number of bedrooms.
How many bedrooms is a really interesting one. So I wonder if that question came from the fact that I mentioned our new construction we just recently completed is 16 two-bedroom apartments.
Yeah.
That is in part because we were building a project in the neighborhoods of sort of Lauraville and Hamilton, which is a neighborhood of mostly single-family cottages, not small, mostly sort of bigger density. And we were going in, it was our first project, and we didn't want to create 30 micro units. And we could only get 16 units maximum without getting a variance because that's all we could park. So we just created 16 two-bedroom units. The 80-unit new construction building we're about to start is majority ones. How you determine how many units to build is some based on science, right? You can get a professional market study. My personal opinion is that they're expensive and they tell you what you want to hear, they don't really teach you anything.
Yeah.
You do your own homework. We're invested enough in the market that we talk to people all the time. We take the phone calls. We have the only new construction product in the market now. So everybody calls us and tells us what they want or why they're renting or why they're not renting. So we know what people are looking for.
Yeah.
And we built our model based on our perceptions of the market. We believe that we know the Northeast Baltimore market, quite frankly, better than anybody.
Yeah, for sure. That is really interesting, making those decisions, big, small, and looking at the rentals in the area, looking at other stuff, but you know it at a level that's unmatched. Final questions, thoughts. Again, the idea of people who are listening and our clients or other relationships we have out there that are listening to you, some quick takeaways, a few quick recommendations, advice. You want to get into this, you want to start getting into developing, want to look at becoming a bigger player, doing bigger projects. Any quick pointers or quick advice to give to someone looking to do it?
Opportunities come in the strangest ways at the strangest times. Engage, network, meet people, talk to people, take the coffee, have the lunch. It's very valuable. You never know when you're wasting your time and all of a sudden a great idea comes or a great partnership comes. When you find people you like and trust and you can work with, keep working with them. Those relationships are incredibly valuable. At some point, things will get hard. It is much easier to deal with hard times with people you have a relationship with than people you don't.
Love that.
Get out there. I'm telling you, get out there, engage, network, and keep people you like and trust close to you.
That's the best advice. It's funny, I do a webinar also on just hard money lending and leverage and getting into real estate investing. And that's one of the last things I end with on my own too. Relationships matter, your reputation matters, who you are, how you're networking, how you're presenting yourself out there. So important. Great stuff.
If any of Josh's customers want to have coffee with me and Josh, let Josh know, and I'm happy to join you.
I love it. Thank you, sir. Always happy to network. I know Sam's always happy to network. I want to thank you again for the time. This will be online. This will be on our social media. This will be on our Facebook, on our Twitter, on our website. We'll be sharing it for anyone who wants to share it, wants to see it, wants to see these two beautiful mugs for repeat over and over again. If anyone's into that, these tan people. Anyway, but check us out online. Anything, Sam, as far as checking you guys out? Is there a website or what do you guys?
So we do a terrible job at marketing our business, in part because we're really not marketing our business.
Right. You're doing your own
projects.
Yeah.
But sohabmore.com, SOHABMORE, sohabmore.com is our new construction project, and it's sort of what we use to market what we're doing in that general neighborhood.
That's cool.
We named it Soha because it's at the corner of Southern and Hartford.
I like that. That's cool. Okay, very good. So check that out. Feel free to reach out to me at Trius Lending if you want Sam's contact info, want to engage, reach out to him, have additional things you're interested in. Other than that, check out our social media. We have other Zooms coming up, both on leveraging hard money, getting into real estate investing, and other great speakers and great seasoned professionals like Sam. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the time. Good to see you. I will see you soon.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, man. Take care. Bye.
See you soon.